Here at the Canadian Club, we have always been a forum for public figures, thought leaders, and decision makers to share their ideas and inform the most relevant and compelling conversations of our time.
We are dedicated to encouraging debate on the issues that matter to this city, this province, and this country.
The Canadian Club is one of the most important podiums anywhere in the world that a Canadian can speak to, tell Canadians what it is that they think, develop those thoughts. And so I want to thank you for that very, very much.
Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.
Through our programs and events, including our youth and young leaders programs, our diversity partnerships, our joint events, and our media and social media opportunities, we offer you access to dynamic political, social, and business figures from abroad and right here at home.
The platform from which the eloquence of Canada has flowed all of that time, whether it be business, education, politics, sports, arts, and culture. If someone wants to say something to Canadians about this country and about the future of this country, this is the venue you choose.
Good afternoon, members and guests of the Canadian Club. Good afternoon. I know we're still clearing away some tables. I certainly hope that you had a chance to enjoy your meal. It's obvious that the energy in this room is incredible, and people are reconnecting with old friends and colleagues and clearly making some new ones as well. My name is Joseph Lowe, President of Canadian Club Toronto, and I'm delighted to be here as your host today. I appreciate those of you who are joining us online thanks to the AV services of Van Valkenburg Communications and livemeeting.ca. We're quite grateful for the generous sponsorship provided today by Canadian Bankers Association, Capital Power, and TD Bank Group. Thank you all for your support. I'd also like to acknowledge Canada's Forest Trust, an ESG company planting smart forests to make positive change vis-a-vis climate change. Our partnership is reducing the carbon footprint of our entire season of Canadian Club Toronto events. A warm welcome as well to students joining us from the University of Toronto's Political Science program in the back, thanks to the generous sponsorship of Bell Canada and Simon Dwyer. Will our future leaders please stand and be acknowledged? Excellent. Our leaders of the future, everybody. And now, to our conversation of the day. The Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry's mandate letter has more than 30 commitments that touch on a long list of critical priorities and imperatives for Canada, including research, post-pandemic economic recovery, clean tech, cyber, quantum, and AI. Now, with AI as a key pillar of our conversation today, I thought it apropos to ask ChatGPT for some talking point ideas. Mr. Minister, here's exactly what I got back. Really. François-Philippe Champagne has always had a deep appreciation for the art of winemaking, particularly when it comes to champagne. During his time as a government official, Mr. Champagne developed a deep appreciation for the art and science of champagne production. Well, it's clear to me that innovation clearly is a journey and not so much a destination. So what questions will you have for the Minister today on these very important issues and maybe on winemaking as well? Please use the Q&A cards that you'll find at your tables. We'll have runners to come around and pick up those questions. We'll get them to our moderator, Amber Mack. For those of you who are joining us online, as always, hit the Submit a Question button on the right-hand side of the screen, and we'll be sure to get your questions that way as well. Now, it's my pleasure to turn things over to my good friend, Mr. Anthony Osler, President and CEO of Canadian Bankers Association, who will provide a non-AI-driven introduction of our special guest and moderator. Anthony.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Joe, for the warm welcome. And I just want to say I love the energy that the Minister brings to this event. So we're very fortunate to have him here. And on behalf of the Canadian Bankers Association and our country's banks, I am excited to introduce today's honours guest, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, the Honourable François-Philippe Champagne. Minister Champagne, first elected in 2015 as the Member of Parliament for the riding of Saint-Maurice-Champlain. This riding is known for producing outstanding political leaders, including, of course, former Prime Minister of Canada, Jean Chrétien. When he's in his riding, Mr. Champagne spends most of his time connecting with his constituents, which is no small feat. As he has often stated, including just now, my riding is bigger than Belgium. In a relatively short time, Mr. Champagne has shown his versatility and ability to take charge of key portfolios. Having previously served as Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Infrastructure and Communities, and Minister of International Trade, he is well positioned to deliver on the challenges and opportunities we confront as a country, and ready to deliver on his mandate with a sense of urgency in this period of increased global competition. It was exciting to hear last week about the launch of the Canada Innovation Corporation with the $2.6 billion in funding over the next 4 years to support further investment in research and development and encourage Canadian companies to scale up their operations through this period of unprecedented global change. As I discussed in my keynote speech here at the Canadian Club Toronto in November, lagging productivity is an important issue for Canadians to address. Encouraging more R&D is one key lever to help our country become more competitive and productive internationally. Today, Minister Champagne will discuss how Canada can stay resilient in challenging times, which is a key ingredient in economic success in a time of constant change. Following his remarks, he will be joined in discussion by Amber Mack, an author and a podcaster, who will dive deeper into how Canada can seize the opportunities of a changing world. Minister, Canada's banks appreciate your tireless commitments and efforts in making our country's economy stronger, both now and into the future. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the Honourable François-Philippe Champagne. Thank you.
Well, yes, come on stage. Good afternoon, everyone. What a pleasure to be here. And I would say, Joseph, I'll keep my communication team. You know, I'm not about to have ChatGPT write the speeches the way I saw that. But listen, it's a real pleasure to be with all of you. And I want to thank you, Joseph, for your leadership. Bringing so many leaders for so many years together and giving us a space to discuss is a great moment for all of us. And I just want to say it's a real pleasure. Donc, bonjour tout le monde. Évidemment, grand plaisir d'être avec vous aujourd'hui. Et merci d'être au Club canadien ici de Toronto. For those of you, I think that when I see the crowd, Joseph, I think people may have seen champagne on the menu. Well, I'm about to say I'm the only champagne you're going to get for lunch. Because when I see so many people, I saw, Joseph said that there's a good group of people, but actually, it's a real pleasure. I've been wanting to come here for quite some time, and I think that a gathering today, at a time, and I think you said it, at a time where we have generational opportunities, I think it's a great moment to come together and talk about, as Canadians, what we can do together to seize these opportunities, and I'll have the chance to do that with Amber. And like I said, it's always a real pleasure to be with all of you. But before I begin, dear friends, let me say a few words about Ukraine. A year ago today, Vladimir Putin launched a brutal, illegal, and unprovoked attack on Ukraine. A year on, as this illegal war drags on, Canada continues to stand by Ukraine in defending democracy against autocracy. As we mark this sad day, I would ask that you please join me and stand up in a moment of silence as we honor all of those who have needlessly died over the past 12 months, and in solidarity with those Ukrainians which are fighting every day to overcome this illegal Russian invasion. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would kindly ask you to stand up and let's have a minute of silence. Please be seated. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I was saying, it's a real pleasure to be here with you, although we marked this tragic moment. And like I said, I hope we can do that more often, I would say, Mr. President. I think that in times like that, there's a lot to be talking about. Obviously, Amber and I, and we like to do these things together, we'll be talking about the economy and how we are transforming the industrial landscape. And I had the privilege of meeting a number of you before I came for lunch, and you've seen in a number of sectors what we've been doing in biomanufacturing, in the aerospace sector, in the defense sector. I was just in Washington a few weeks ago. What we're doing in the battery ecosystem, and I'm very proud to what we have achieved, the electric vehicle, hydrogen, and obviously you mentioned in your introducing remark, the role of AI in our lives and quantum and cyber security, and how we're building these very resilient supply chain, which I think are going to be important to ensure not only the prosperity of today, but the prosperity of tomorrow. And investing also in key enablers, because recently I was on a plane, and you know, you're like me, you travel a bit around the country. It's always some of these moments. There's someone who was next to me, a researcher, he said, "Sir, do you realize that the science of today is the economy of tomorrow?" And he said, "Thank you for what you're doing. But we always need to do more." So for me, obviously, I'm always reminded that our vision, and you've heard me say that many, many times, is to be the green supplier of choice to the world. I certainly believe, and I hope you will share that belief with me, that we can be the supplier of choice to the world. And I'll have the chance to talk about that with Amber a bit more. But the thing that I hear most, and I think probably something that I have been promoting around the world, whether it's in when I was in Tokyo, whether when I was in Seoul, in Stuttgart, in Frankfurt, in Washington, the thing that distinguishes most Canada is talent. And I think talent is really the greatest asset of Canada. And I think there's a lot of people here joining us that would recognize that the key enabler today is the talent. And I'm very pleased to say that Canada is still a big magnet for talent. And I think in the economy of the 21st century, you'd probably agree with me that talent is king. Le talent, c'est ce qui nous permet d'attirer chez nous ici au Canada, à travers le pays, des investissements majeurs et stratégiques dans des secteurs de pointe comme la biofabrication, l'aérospatiale, évidemment dans les secteurs de l'économie du futur. Talent also explains why the Toronto Waterloo corridor is the fastest growing innovation hub, not only in Canada, not only in North America, but in the world. And that's something that is resonating around when you're talking to global CEO. But as all of you know all too well, that doesn't happen with wishful thinking. And many of you are leading organizations. You can attract talent, you can develop talent, you can nurture talent. And in conversation that I'm having with many of you across the nation, whether you're going to rural Canada, whether you're going to East, West, or in the prairies, or in Western Canada, talent and the skills gap is something that comes up again, again, and again. That's why I'm so happy to be able to make a bit of news today. So for the colleagues of the Globe and Mail, not only in what I'm going to say, but this is the piece of news that there might be other things I may say that may make news. It happens to me in Washington a couple of times. But I'm happy to say that we'll be investing $250 million in a new upskilling program in high-growth sector. And this is about making sure that we put business at the forefront of the upskilling strategy, because at the end of the day, you know best. This will help 15,000 mid-career workers to transition in the new position that we're going to be talking about today in high-growth sector, whether you're talking about the digital economy, cybersecurity, advanced manufacturing, clean technology, or biomanufacturing. And we'll be doing that with an outstanding leader that I have the privilege of having at my table, that I have the privilege of seeing time and time again, the CEO of Pallet Skills, Rhonda Barnett. Why don't you stand up, Rhonda, so that we can give you a big round of applause. Indeed, Rhonda is probably the most important person in the room today, no offense to anyone, but she's going to be helping us to really upskill about 15,000 mid-career workers. And thanks for your work and your leadership. We're very happy to partner with you because I think we would all agree that this is the best way to ensure prosperity for the long term. And some of you know me, I believe in the equation that manufacturing plus innovation equal prosperity. So therefore, we're going to be doing that together. Mais évidemment, pour nous, c'est une occasion unique d'aider les gens à jouer un rôle clé dans l'économie du 21e siècle, comme je le disais, mais aussi dans l'ère, ou disons dans les grandes transformations de l'économie qu'on voit dans l'ère numérique, ou évidemment dans l'économie durable. Alors, ça va aider plusieurs milliers de travailleurs et travailleuses à travers le pays. So, Rhonda, thank you for what you're doing. It's incredible, and I think everyone here relies on you to make sure that we will increase not only our productivity, but providing opportunities to people at the end of the day. So, ladies and gentlemen, I know you came here because we want to have a discussion. It's like a big family group that we have assembled today. I would say Canada has what the economy of the 21st century needs. And hopefully today we can engage in that discussion together. But I'd say let's seize the moment. I don't think there's ever been a better time for us to lead in the world. Let's be ambitious, because that's something that I always say, let's raise our level of ambition as Canadians. And let's make sure that Canada, we are at the forefront of the 21st century economy. With that, ladies and gentlemen, Amber and I will have a discussion. And please send your questions so that we can touch whatever topic you would like today, because I want you to leave here with a sense that we had this discussion that we need in Canada. Merci tout le monde.
Excellent.
How are you doing?
Great.
Good to see you.
It's good to see you. All right. So as you mentioned, we're going to chat for about 20 minutes, and then we're going to have audience questions. So please send in your questions. I wanted to start with the title of the event, because we talk a lot about resiliency. This is a topic that you've spoken a lot about. I think it's also true that when we talk about Canadian innovation and tie that to the term resiliency, we've been talking about this for many, many years. In 2023, what are some of those pillars of resiliency that makes things different?
Well, there's three things that comes to mind. And when you talk to leaders around the world, you know, we hosted the Prime Minister of Japan, we had the President of Korea, we had the German Chancellor, I met CEOs in Japan, in Europe, in the United States. I think there's three things which are top of mind to any leader do you meet around the world today. It's food security, energy security, and supply chain resiliency. And that is really three areas where I think Canada can play a key role. I am one who believes that our mission should be how can we feed the world, and a portion of the world, whether it's plant protein, and that's why we have a cluster, for example, in the prairies, because I think we can play a big role in that at a moment where I think we're facing, I mean, let me even go back, and I think I am one, probably of an age who believed that after the fall of the Berlin Wall, we were probably on the same river, maybe not on the same boat, but at least it felt like the world was going in the right direction. You know, we had stability, we had prosperity, we had peace in Europe, which has been providing that kind of environment that allowed for a number of us to be able to live in this world, which I hope we're going to regain, but certainly on the anniversary of this terrible war in Ukraine is questioning that. But I would say that when you put that in perspective, that's why when I look at that and how I see Canada playing a role, for me, today, when I see the geopolitics of the world, when I see the challenges we're facing, that's why I think we need to raise up to the moment. And certainly food security, energy security, I don't need to tell you. You know, listen, we hosted the German Chancellor, and one thing is clear is that obviously they'd like to partner with us when it comes to energy resiliency. Just look at what's going on in Europe. And actually, we're all paying for the war of Vladimir Putin. If you see inflation today, I mean, it's kind of the perfect storm, because on one end, you have countries like Germany, which has record prices on energy, and at the same time, ports in Ukraine, which are blocking the export, you know, the Russian blocking the export of wheat. And that is kind of the perfect storm, because when you have high prices on energy and food, obviously this is going to drive inflation, and I think we're all paying for that. So that, for me, is very concerning. And that's why I think on the energy side, we need to do that. The same thing, you know, when you go in Asia, they certainly would like to partner more with Canada. I think we have a role to play with that. And supply chain resiliency is everything. And I think, you know, I don't need to tell you, but one thing that is very visible to me, at least, in the key sector of industries we have in Canada is that global supply chains are becoming more regional. and that you have a far bigger, I would say, focus on resiliency than pure efficiency. And that is playing to Canada's strength because I was with one of the investors of one of the biggest fund, I think, in the Middle East. And he said, François, if it was your money, where would you put it? Just look at the map today. You know, just look at, if you have billions of dollars of investment, who's providing you the stability, the predictability, and the environment in order to have these kind of investment? And I think in that case, Canada stands out. And that's what I often said in many places around the world. But I need you to help me to make the case for Canada. But it's fascinating when you talk to global CEO that they're not saying anymore, it's no longer why Canada, it's how and when. And obviously, there's things we need to fix on infrastructure, on logistics, on making sure that we can streamline permitting to make sure that these natural resources can get to market. But I would say the fundamentals are here, and I think that's why you've seen unprecedented number of investment, whether it's hydrogen, where we had Air Products building the largest hydrogen plant in North America, by the way, is in Alberta, where you have, for example, Umicore, which is the only company in the world, which is non-Asian, which is doing what they call precursor to cathode active material in Kingston. There'll be a piece of Kingston in every car in North America. Because if you don't buy from Umicore, you have to go buy in Asia. And therefore, my mission and our mission should be, how can we insert ourselves in these critical supply chain of the economy of the 21st century? You don't need to have the full supply chain. And I know some of my words in Washington last time got picked up a bit. But my thing is that when you come to critical supply chain, we need to insert ourselves in key areas. And one that comes to mind, just to move now to biomanufacturing, Accelera. I'm not sure everyone knows about Accelera, but Accelera is essential to every vaccine in the world. Talk to Pfizer, talk to Moderna, talk to anyone. Company in Vancouver, just doing the protein to deliver the vaccine. And that's the same type of vision where every time I'm trying to insert ourselves in the key supply chain, just think about the batteries. You know, listen, when we started that, let's be honest, I don't think we were on the radar screen of many people. And today, don't take it from me, but Bloomberg ranked Canada second in the world after China, ahead of the United States for the battery ecosystem. And why does that matter? Because 40% of the value of a lightweight vehicle of the future is the battery. So you own that supply chain, you own the piece which is the most added value. And I come from Shawinigan. You know, you may remember the other little guy. He calls me the very, very little guy, by the way. And I remember when I was a kid, you know, my grandfather was of that generation where we're cutting lumber to put that on a river and exporting to the United States. We're not going to do that in the 21st century. We're going to be bringing the value. We're going to mine the minerals here. We're going to refine them. We're going to build a battery. We're going to build a car of the future. That is where we need to be. And I think I can go on in every industrial sector, but that's really my vision, to capture the value here. We're not going to do what we did 100 years ago.
Let's talk for a second about critical minerals. For the past few years, I've hosted a podcast called This is Mining, where we've talked a lot about critical minerals. And one of the things that became very apparent is that we do have what the world wants, but I wonder sometimes if we can give it to the world fast enough. So can you talk a little bit about the speed at which we need to move forward, because there does exist a bottleneck here, and we're going to have to move pretty quickly.
Well, you got it, Amber, as always, by the way, I must say. Speed and scale. That's the name of the game, because those are generational opportunities. Those who are of my vintage, I'm 52, but you see, when is the last time that you had a transition, for example, with respect to vehicle? I mean, we've all been driven for most of our lives, internal combustion engine. Now you have a shift in technology. That's why I'm saying these shifts don't happen very often in your lifetime. And that's why when people say you have a lot of energy, well, I said, because if we don't seize it now, we may have to wait 30 years until the next breakthrough technology will come, whatever that might be. And so that's why I think in critical minerals, our mission, and that's why we put the critical mineral strategy, is really to make sure that we expand speed and scale. Because when you're talking to global CEOs today, they're not starting they're starting from the point, when do they need the battery? And then they're doing their critical path backward and say, well, we need to start construction now. That's why you've seen significant interest like LG Stellantis, for example, Volkswagen, to name one. When I was with Oliver, the group CEO of the 12 brands in Germany, I loved it, not because I said it, but because he said it in front, I think was Bloomberg or Reuters. He said, Canada is the logical choice. That doesn't come from me. The Germans, never been in our auto sector, they say Canada is the logical choice because today, whether you're looking for 5 things that bring people in Canada, talent, undoubtedly. We're still a big magnet for talent. The second thing I would say is the ecosystem. And that's where we need to remind everyone. When I was there, I was reminding them that, you know, the Detroit-Windsor corridor is the 3rd largest in the world after the one in China and Germany to build cars. The 3rd one is critical minerals, and reminding that we are the only Western nation with all the critical minerals, not only to build batteries, but semiconductors, and their proximity is everything. Proximity to resources, market, and assembly line. The 3rd one I would say is around making sure that we have the renewable energy. Because when you're looking at the global manufacturer, everyone wants to green their supply chain. And that's why I think we were smart, because we were ahead of the game when we said we're going to decarbonize, for example, steel making with ArcelorMittal and Alcoa. And we're going to green aluminum production in Canada. You may not have seen, but I tend to follow these things. BMW, not me. BMW announced yesterday that all the cars of BMW manufactured in North America are going to lose aluminum, which is produced in Saguenay, in Quebec, to the process which they call ELYSIS, which is the greenest aluminum in the world. And my mission then is to do green batteries and green semiconductor. And the last one I would say is around access to market. Never we should market Canada as a country of 38 million people. But as a former trade minister, I always say, this is a country that gives you preferential market access to 1.5 billion consumers in the world. To the CPTPP, I must say I'm proud because, you know, when you're in politics, you probably do 1 or 2 things that will have a real impact in the lives of Canadians for generations. But I think the fact that we are the 2nd largest economy and the TPP grouping of countries in Asia gives us a seat at the table. The fact that we've been able to renew NAFTA is obviously essential for economy. But the fact that we also have a leg and access to the largest market in Europe so that when you produce in Canada, you're considered domestic, for example, in Germany or in Italy or in Poland. And that plays in both ways because when you look at these big factories, if you take like a battery plant, let's say it's about $5 billion, you at least have 20% of that, which is equipment. So when I talk to CFOs of global companies, I said, think about the import duties you're going to save if you come to Canada. So all these things makes us very competitive. It's the people, it's the natural resources, it's the ecosystem, it's the renewable energy, it's access to market. And I think this is what we need to be promoting around the world. And I'll tell you just as an aside to make you laugh, when I'm in Tokyo and people talk to me about Bécancour in Quebec, I know I'm onto something. Because if those of you don't know, Bécancour is a town of about 5,000 people, which now has lithium and graphite refining, and where BASF and GM POSCO are looking to establish big manufacturing center. But it just tells me, it happens to know a small place that I know because I drive by every time. But when in Tokyo they talk about Bécancour, you're in the right spot.
So we're good on the speed front. You're confident.
Yeah, but we need scale. The problem is volume, is that, you know, there's a mismatch between the demand and the supply. And that's what really, with Vic Fideli, my colleague in Ontario, colleagues in Quebec, colleagues in different provinces, has really been to build that because it was a bit the chicken and the egg. You were talking to the mining company, you said, well, Minister, if you get me a long-term offtake contract, we'll do it. And on the end, you had the OEM that said, well, Minister will come if you have the supply of the critical minerals. So honestly, what we've been doing, I'll put that in a book one day. There'll be a chapter on matchmaking. It was really about matchmaking because these were 2 industries that have never really worked together that needed to come together. The mining industry and the OEM industry and the car manufacturers, and how you merge that to produce the car of the future. And I'll leave it there, Amber. But for me, I keep saying, I think that consumers are going to drive the transformation because I don't think people will be satisfied with an electric car. I think the future is a green car. And you know, don't take it from me. Look at Mercedes-Benz, for example, has the vision on their website that if you ever buy one of their cars in 2039, they'll give you a certificate that there's 0 carbon. So you wonder why, when we had the German Chancellor, we signed an MOU with them. Because that's where we want to be. Because when I go there, I say, I think I'm not going there to sell anything. I said, I think I'm part of a solution that you need. Mm-hmm. And that's why you see Volkswagen, you see Mercedes-Benz, you see BMW, some of the biggest, I would say, partners that we never had. But that's the same thing on biomanufacturing when we got Moderna. And I'm happy to tell you about the cold call that started this whole discussion, but maybe for another time.
I have a couple more questions. I want to remind people again, if you have questions, please write them on a piece of paper and we'll get to some of your questions as well. I wanted to shift focus a little bit to talk about artificial intelligence. You said just a few days ago, when people think about AI, they think about Canada. As someone who has covered this space, I think that's absolutely true. But I don't think that when Canadians think about AI, they think about Canada. And I ask you that because I find that we have pockets across the country where there is research happening, but there is not necessarily mass adoption at the scale that we need.
I agree with you. I mean, you're right. I mean, it's always interesting. You know, I spent a bit of my professional life abroad, and how you see Canada from abroad and how you see Canada from Canada is always interesting. 2 data points that should be of interest to you. When the Chancellor of Germany came to Canada, the visit they decided to do, not that we suggested, was to an AI center in Montreal. When the President of Korea came, the visit he decided to do, not that we selected, was to come to an AI center in Toronto. So it's quite fascinating that you see someone is saying something. And I can tell you, my first meeting in Washington, they said, Minister, you really have a head start when it comes to AI. And let's be honest, it's not all the time that our friends downside would say that we're ahead of something. So I have to ask them to repeat it, just to make sure that it would be in the record of discussion that says it's great, but I think you're right. I don't think as Canadians we have seen yet the potential. You know, I'm certainly, you know, when I started at that, I thought, you know, you might see that in the medicine field where you'd see a doctor who can look at a scan of a brain tumor and compare that with, say, 3 billion images, so AI would help to make a better diagnostic. But just earlier this week, I was with making an announcement in Montreal, and it's fascinating to see the number of things where AI could be relevant. I'll give you one. For example, in terms of food, unbeknown to me that McCain is using artificial intelligence to select the potatoes to avoid food waste in their process, or that you have students who have work on an AI system that will allow for better heart surgery. I mean, I think what we need to realize, and I hope that together we can do that, there's the green transformation of the economy, but at the same time, there's the digital transformation of the economy that is coming. And what we need to do if we want to create the prosperity and the jobs of tomorrow is to make sure that we bring AI to our small and medium-sized businesses. I still believe maybe one day there'll be a line on balance sheet that would say data, you know, because how you use data, but data for the people. And that's why when I introduced, and we started with you, Joseph, with that speech, it reminded me as well that we need frameworks. And that's why I was proud that Canada, Prime Minister Trudeau and President Macron, we started the global partnership on artificial intelligence to lead kind of the framework we need to make sure that we have AI that serves the people. And I think that in Canada, the digital charter that I've introduced was really to put us best in class to make sure that, you know, we have this framework that will allow for innovation, but at the same time that people would have trust and confidence that their data is respected and protected. But I think AI, for me, listen, you'll have vertical industry, whether you say biomanufacturing, aerospace, defense, you could say EV vehicle, you could go down to all these industries. But at the end, what is going to be enablers is AI, quantum, and cybersecurity. And I would say that the fact that we had national strategy on the 3 of them is really giving us an edge because a lot of the people, when you go, Washington is an example. By the way, you never go too often to Washington. If there's something that I can say, you know, there's so many people going there, but every time you go there, I think we bring something back. And that, for me, is quite relevant in that. But I think they see that, and they see that we should be complementary when it comes to that. Because I always say to my American friends, there's no competition between us. The big prize for us in North America is how can we innovate more together? How can we manufacture more together? And how can we sell more together to the rest of the world? It's true in aerospace. It's true in defense. And we've been working on that with Minister Anand. First time in Canada, at least recent history that people can remember, that you had a Minister of Industry and Minister of Defense that goes to Washington to say, you know what, Yes, there are going to be big programs, but Canada needs to be part of that. And we want to see investment in Canada. And the good thing is that every F-35 that's going to fly in the world, not just the Canadian fleet, but every F-35 will have a piece of Canada. And that's the type of approach. And they said, we've not been spoken like that very often. I say, well, that's good, because that's where we're in town.
I love it. I just have one more question for you before we're going to go to audience questions. And this is the question about digital skills. So first of all, congratulations on that announcement. It's very exciting. And one of the things that keeps me up at night is this.
I have a few issues as well.
Yes, I bet you do. Is this digital skills conversation. So we know that 9 out of 10 jobs of the future will require digital skills. We also know that in a recent Global Digital Skills Index, Canada's score is 23, below the global average of 33. So we still have work to do. So my question for you is, this announcement, is a good thing and a move in the right direction. How do we bring more Canadians along, knowing that this transformation is happening, even when some of them perhaps don't even know that it's taking place?
Well, I think training is part of it. To be honest, I think, I come from a blue-collar community. Most of folks in my neck of the wood would go to the plant, and I think that, it's not necessarily something that people would have thought that really impact them. Although, if you go to a plant these days, you realize that there's far more automation, robots. I mean, the type of jobs that I saw my uncles do at the plant, we had the first Alcan plant in North America that was there for 100 years. And at the time, we did not, invest in new technologies. And I said, well, that plant is closed now. So I always say when people, should we go in these new technology? I said, do you want to be Polaroid or Apple? I've seen what it is to look like Polaroid. Just come to my neck of the wood. And all my uncles have lost their job, and at the time, so they would certainly find other things. Well, not really. So I think we need to be at the forefront of that. And how do you bring people who also may not think that AI or the digital transformation will touch them is something that we can do together, because it's at every step of the way. I mean, government can put programs, we can put national strategy, but I'm very one who believes, and that's what we're trying to do now, is on this upskilling that we have decided, is that companies, businesses will have the means to do that, and making sure that we bring workers on board, mid-career workers who probably were trained at a different time and did not need perhaps these skills. But for me, I go back always to the 5 things that attract people in Canada, and the talent, and the fact that we have an educated workforce, the fact that we are a magnet, and the fact that we have the thinking, I would say, even to bring the digital skills and bringing our SMEs. And I know there's a number of banks, and you were kind to introduce that. I think that we should really, if there's a discussion, we could go, or kind of a national roundtable on that. How do you prepare Canada for the economy of the 21st century? What is the challenge to prosperity? We've been trying to tackle that in this country for decades. Now, we're coming with the Canadian Innovation Corporation, and I think that's going to be part of the answer, because we were pretty good at the pre-2 million. We were pretty good at the 20 million plus in what I managed through a strategic innovation fund. But the value of debt of commercialization between 2 and 20, we're not that good. Now we're going to have an agency which is dedicated to that, and hopefully, this morning I was just in Markham, and we were actually talking to the semiconductor industry. And the AI component of that is tremendous. And I'll leave it there. For example, my message to the industry this morning, and you may have heard me in the press because it was picked up a couple of times. I said, why don't we replicate, one of the best corridor we have created in terms of jobs, in terms of innovation, in terms of economic output for the country is in the auto sector. That Windsor-Detroit corridor is quite amazing. I said, why don't we replicate that in the semiconductor? Because you may know or not, and I always say that, what's the underlying principle between the IRA in the United States and the CHIPS Act is resiliency. Well, you may know or may not know that most of the packaging and testing for semiconductors produced in North America are indeed packaged and tested in Bromont in Quebec. And actually what I've been saying, and good thing I'm going to see the CEO of IBM next week in New York, is that why don't we replicate that kind of corridor between Bromont and Albany, so that we can have another corridor in a key sector of the future. Because if You know, at the time when I was Foreign Affairs Minister, and I'll leave it there, when we realized and say, as G7, we had invested billions in research for vaccines. And yet we were all scrambling for vaccine in a way. I think we've been smart and lucky to do that. And say, at the time I said to colleagues, what are, you know, if we don't want to repeat that, what are the key enablers of the future? And certainly critical minerals and semiconductors came to the table. If you look 30 years ahead, now if I can succeed in inserting Canada in this key supply chain of semiconductors, I think we could replicate something that has provided hundreds of thousands of jobs for Canadians, but also being key in this sector of the future like semiconductor. And that's really one of the things that if you ask me what I'm working on now is that if I can create another corridor like that, I'm trying to create one on defense. We have one on the auto sector. I think that concept of corridor north-south where we innovate, build together, I think this is very good for Canada.
Excellent. Okay, so we only have 5 minutes left, and we have a lot of questions. So I did want to get to this one because it is on the topic of cybersecurity, which we didn't really cover too much. So the question is this, and maybe we can do these quickly and try to get through
Why
two
don't
or
you
three.
do 2 or 3 and I'll try to
Let's do
squeeze
it.
that.
Okay. The Globe published an article this week on Canada's AI innovation being a target for hacking/theft by China/Russia. How can we protect our innovation without stifling it?
Well, I think, you know, I was shocked and unhappy when I saw the latest report on cyber, not just cybersecurity, but you may have seen on research. If I just broaden the topic a bit, you know, where we have seen that some, you know, university and research, some university were doing research with, you know, Chinese military institute or the like. And we had already made sure prior, a year ago, that we would have stronger rules that takes into account national security. But this was a time where really we went back and said we need to do more. And you may have seen, and I think I said that there will be no more funding for these type of research. And for me, that's just common sense, that you don't want, you know, researchers to be partnering in sensitive technology that could hurt our national security. And at the time, you know, that's one thing in Ottawa that we're not so good. People would say, Minister, you don't have the regulatory power to dictate. But I said I have a lot of soft power to say a few things. And I said, whilst I can direct the Granting Council, I expect the universities and the provinces to follow suit. And I'm happy to see that this is happening because I think we just need to engage with eyes wide open and always be on the look for these things to make sure that, you know, these key technologies, sensitive technologies, we need to make sure that we've our guards up to make sure that we don't fall into a place of complacency that could hurt our national security. And today, I would say national security and economic prosperity are pretty much going hand in hand. So we need to do that, and we'll continue.
All right, let's take this next one. Rising global uncertainty is forcing many countries to decouple and become more self-sufficient. Are you looking at any new ways of encouraging Canadian institutional investors to allocate more capital here at home?
Oh, I love that question. Yes, and the thing I said in Washington, because, you know, there's kind of different terms being French shoring. I said, what about continental shoring? I love this one. That's the last one I've used in Washington because it gives that sense of togetherness with our friends in the U.S. To your point, yes. I mean, I'll give you an example. I'll try to be very short, but Brookfield, you may have seen the Intel announcement where Brookfield partnered with Intel to build this gigafactory, semiconductor, about 30 billion out of memory, 25, 28. And Brookfield came to the table. So you know me by now. You know what I did the next thing. I called Bruce Flatt, the CEO, and I say, oh, what if I brought some battery manufacturing capacity? Could we partner and could we bring funds, Canadian funds, and there's many representatives here, to do that together? I think that obviously it's for them to decide if that's a good investment. But for me, the idea that you have long-term returns, but you use that capital to allow for these massive factories to be built, because I'll tell you, I've met CFO of some of the largest company in the sector in North America, and in all of them, I was a bit say, who am I to say to them, would you need a bit of help? And most of them raised their hand and said, yeah, if you can help us to really gather that, because if you look at, for example, the number of battery plants, you probably need 12 to 16 in North America to meet the demand. And the demand, I'm saying, in 2 years from now, there's very few companies who could muster, you know, having on their balance sheet 80 billion, 100 billion to build that. So if we are creative, and that's what I'm trying to do with the sector in Canada, that could help us. You know, when you're competing, and trust me, I compete every single day, is you have to just to be a bit more creative in how you do that in our value proposition. And that's what I've been trying to do with a number of partners here in Canada.
Excellent. Do we have time for one more question? All right. There's a few really great questions, but I'm going to end on this one. How can connectivity and digital policy help reduce Canada's emissions?
Well, I think that today, you know, it's interesting. As a former infrastructure minister, when you go urban, they talk about connectivity. Well, when you go rural, they talk about connectivity. And obviously, when you're in an urban setting, they talk about mobility. But I think today, the most interesting thing that you see is that most people consume through their phone. You know, cell phone connectivity is everything. You know, whether it's through you know, the internet or through your cell phone. And I think for me, enabling that, you're talking about digital economy. You're talking about having everyone participate in the new economy. I think that's something we need to work together. And certainly that's something we've been doing. And there might be people here asking, that's why I've been doing on the telecom side as well, to make sure that we have policies in place that not only would bring prices down for Canadians, but at the same time that would have competition, but would have also innovation. In a country where I would say, you know, I come from a place as well where, you know, a good part of my own district was not connected. And I've seen the impact. You know, when you have families who say, sir, I have to bring my kids to the library in the evening to do the homework, or some business people say, I go to Saint-Hubert for lunch because they have cell phone coverage. You realize that that's not the most efficient. We want people to export. We want people to be part of the 21st century economy. And I think connectivity is essential to a country like us. So how can it bring down emission? Well, I think because today I say excellence has no address. You know, you could be in small town in Canada, in Nova Scotia, or you could be here in Bay Street or in Markham or in Waterloo, and you could create great things. But, you know, I'll give you an example. I'll finish there. I was amazed this week because I went to this place where I met three young students with a backpack. And they said, Minister, thanks to the innovation cluster we created in AI, we've invented an artificial heart. And I look at them, they look about between 20 and 30. And I said, it's not that you chose the easiest business to come in, you know, heart surgery is not exactly. I said, how could three students with a backpack convince people that you could build a heart, artificial heart? Well, she said, sir, it's very simple. 50 cardiac surgeons told us no, but there was one Canadian, I think at Johns Hopkins, and he said yes. And today, their devices, 3 young women, we started that in Montreal, are the reference for all cardiac surgery in North America. So when I see young people like that who break, you know, the ceiling, who launch themselves in things like that, I just think as a nation, you know, if we're just a bit more ambitious, there's nothing we can't achieve.
I love that. Excellence has no address, but you should stay in Canada.
Totally. As long as it's in Canada, I love that. Amber.
Yes, I had to add that.
That's why we need to do that together, obviously.
Thank you. Thank you.
Monsieur le ministre, merci mille fois pour votre leadership vraiment visionnaire et vos remarques incisives aujourd'hui. On behalf of Canadian Club members and guests, thank you for demonstrating impressively really kind of the resilience and the strengths of our country. I certainly had a few takeaways. Certainly the opportunity is before us to drive some of these generational opportunities where the science of today will become the economy of tomorrow. I've really, really enjoyed that. Food, energy, and supply chain, these are common challenges we share with our partners, but I think common opportunities as well as we come together with our partners in the continent and beyond. I think we have more than a fighting chance, and we'll take more than our fair share in this regard. And then finally, I love this comment as well, this notion that value extraction is one thing, that was yesterday. Value creation and value capture is really the future of where we're headed as a nation. So thank you so much, Mr. Minister. Remarkable remarks indeed. And to you, Amber, thank you on behalf of all our members and guests for your expert moderation today and really driving at some incredible points. Now, guests, before we conclude, let me briefly share some information about our upcoming events. This Monday, February 27th, we'll host a virtual discussion on the international experience of employee ownership trusts. On Tuesday, February 28th, Bernard Lord, Chair of the Board of Directors of Canadian Life and Health Insurance Association and the CEO of Medavie, will join us in conversation with Carly Weeks, health reporter at the Globe and Mail. And looking ahead to March, the President and CEO of Laurentian Bank of Canada, Rania Llewellyn, will be joining us on March 7th. She is indeed. So please visit us at canadianclub.org to learn more about these events, purchase your memberships, and find out more. Finally, I'd like to offer a final round of sincere thanks and appreciation to our sponsors today, Canadian Bankers Association, Capital Power, and TD Bank Group. We could not have hosted this event without your support today. And a final shout out as well to Air Canada, who joined us again today as our trusted airline sponsor. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for joining us live as well as online today. Have a great afternoon and a great weekend. We'll see you again soon. That was wonderful.